What if that little voice in your head, the one you call you, the one narrating your every waking moment, is an imposter? What if your consciousness, your precious sense of self, is nothing more than a recent glitchy software update installed in the human brain out of sheer terror? For most of human history, our ancestors weren't thinking, they were merely listening. Instead of an internal monologue, their minds were filled with auditory hallucinations, divine commands that echoed in their skulls, telling them when to plant, when to fight, and when to build gargantuan monuments to the voices themselves. They were not conscious beings, they were puppets. This spectacular, sanity-shredding idea wasn't cooked up in some back-alley laboratory. It was painstakingly assembled by a psychologist named Julian Jaynes in his explosive 1976 book, The Origin of Consciousness in the Breakdown of the Bicameral Mind. He wasn't just pulling theories from thin air, he was performing an autopsy on antiquity. Jaynes ripped open the oldest texts of humanity, from the Epic of Gilgamesh to the Iliad, and he found a terrifying void. He noticed the heroes of these ancient tales never introspect. They don't sit and ponder their choices. When faced with a crisis, they don't have a crisis of conscience. They receive a direct order from a god. A voice simply appears and tells them what to do. But how could this even work? Jaynes proposed a shocking neurological architecture. He theorized that the ancient human brain was split into two chambers, a bicameral system. The right hemisphere, the realm of creativity and pattern matching, would generate stress-induced commands based on memory and experience. These commands weren't thoughts. They were broadcast across the corpus callosum, the bridge between the brain's halves, and received by the language centers in the left hemisphere. The left hemisphere didn't interpret this signal as its own thought. It experienced it as an external, authoritative voice. The voice of a god, a king, or a dead ancestor. There was no negotiation. There was no internal debate. There was only the God voice and the obedient human automaton. The left brain heard the command, and the body simply executed it, like a drone receiving a signal from its operator. There was no I to get in the way. Imagine an entire civilization wired this way. It wouldn't be a society. It would be a perfect, unthinking organism. A grotesque theocracy where every action was divinely mandated. The voices of the gods were absolute, and the voices of kings were seen as direct extensions of that divine will, amplified through monolithic statues and echoing temples. Those golden idols and stone oracles weren't just religious symbols. Jaynes argued they were functional tools, social pacemakers designed to broadcast and reinforce the commands. They were speakers hooked up to the collective unconscious, ensuring the entire city-state moved as one, without a single dissenting thought. Because there were no thoughts to begin with. Then, around 3,000 years ago, the system crashed. The gods went silent. Jaynes pins this catastrophic breakdown to the chaos of the Bronze Age collapse. Vast, interconnected civilizations crumbled. Famine, war, and mass migration scrambled the old world order. The world suddenly became too complex, too chaotic for the old bicameral system to handle. Writing, a new technology, began to externalize memory, creating a conceptual space where thoughts could exist outside of immediate, hallucinatory commands. The divine signal, once crystal clear, was now drowned in static. For the first time in history, humanity was left utterly, horrifyingly alone in their own heads. Imagine the horror. The divine voice that guided your every move doesn't just go silent. It curdles. It starts to glitch, to stutter, to whisper things that are no longer commands from a king or a god, but the venomous ravings of a demon squatting in your skull. The right hemisphere, once a source of divine order, becomes a parasitic twin, screaming bloody murder into your ear. This wasn't just a mental health crisis. It was a species-wide demonic possession, your own mind weaponized against you. The voice that once told you to plant the crops now tells you to salt the earth, to burn the village, to claw out your own eyes. You aren't sick, you are haunted by the rotting ghost of your own obsolete neurology. And amidst the screaming chaos, some voices didn't turn evil, they just fractured. A stray command, a garbled fragment of the old divine signal, would punch through the static. These were the first prophets, not holy men, but people with faulty wiring, picking up the last dying broadcasts from a God that had already flatlined, desperately trying to piece together a message from the cosmic noise. So what do you do when the gods hang up on you? You get desperate. Humanity, now hopelessly alone in the terrifying silence of their own heads, began a frantic, bloody search for the lost signal. This, Jaynes argues, is the grotesque origin of organized religion. It was never about faith, it was about debugging the system. Every ritual, every prayer, every animal sacrifice was a frantic attempt to get the gods back online. Priests would read entrails not for prophecy, but like a technician reading a computer's guts for an error code. They'd burn incense, chant, and whip themselves into a frenzy, anything to reboot the neurological hardware and hear that voice just one more time. But here's the truly unsettling part. That old hardware isn't gone. It's just dormant, lurking under the floorboards of our modern minds. And sometimes, when the new system crashes, the old one flickers back to life. The auditory hallucinations of a schizophrenic? That's the bicameral mind trying to reboot, the God voice speaking in a language we no longer understand. Think about glossolalia, or speaking in tongues. An eruption of pure, unfiltered language from the right hemisphere, bypassing the conscious self entirely. Or the artist's muse, that bolt from the blue, that whisper of an idea that seems to come from somewhere else entirely. These aren't metaphors, they are echoes. Glitches in our modern programming that reveal the ancient ghost in the machine. Because if the bicameral mind was the brain's original operating system, hardwired and ancient, then what are we now? What is this little voice inside your head that's listening to me right now? According to this theory, it's nothing but software, learned software. A clever trick we taught ourselves to fill the terrifying silence. Your consciousness, your sense of self, isn't a fundamental part of you. It's a cultural invention, a piece of code passed down through language and stories. It's a user interface that creates the illusion of a central command, a pilot in the cockpit. But there is no pilot, there's just the machine. We built a metaphorical space inside our own minds, a little narrative theater where we construct a character called the self, an analog I that walks around and pretends to be in charge. You aren't a soul. You are a story the brain tells itself about being a person, a ghost haunting a machine that once spoke to gods. And here is the most unsettling part, the jagged little pill at the center of this whole magnificent nightmare. The self, your inner voice, that constant companion in your skull you call me, wasn't a glorious evolutionary leap. It was a panic-induced patch job. It was born from the trauma of cosmic abandonment. When the God voices flickered and died, humanity was plunged into a terrifying, unprecedented silence. The commands stopped. The guidance vanished. To fill that deafening void, we invented an internal narrator. We created a story of I to make sense of a world that no longer made sense. Your consciousness is a ghost story you tell yourself so you don't have to listen to the silence. You can see the software update happening in real time, etched into the pages of ancient literature. Read the Iliad. The heroes are magnificent puppets. They don't have interior lives, they have divine interventions. A god breathes might into a warrior, or puts a thought in his head. They are biological machines awaiting instructions from the sky. Then, a few hundred years later, you get the Odyssey, and you meet Odysseus. He is a freak, a monster of a new age. He lies, he schemes, he dissembles. He argues with his own heart, telling it to endure. He has a private, internal space where he can plan and deceive. He isn't being guided by gods, he is navigating the terrifying new world of his own mind. He is the first modern man, and he is utterly alone. This brings the whole horrifying idea crashing into your living room. If consciousness, this sense of self, is just a 3,000-year-old piece of cultural software, a clever trick we learned to survive a psychological apocalypse, then how stable is it really? It's not a biological fact, it's a fragile narrative, and narratives can be rewritten. In an age of information overload, of algorithmic nudges and digital prophets screaming for your attention through your phone, is our delicate internal monologue being drowned out? Are we being programmed with new commands, not from gods, but from corporations and code? Is the bicameral mind making a comeback with a corporate logo? So forget whether Julian Jaynes was right or wrong. That's the boring question. The theory's real power isn't as an answer, but as a weapon aimed directly at our certainty. It pries open the skull and exposes the machinery, suggesting that the operator might just be a ghost. It forces us to ask the most profoundly disturbing question of all. If that voice in your head, the one you think of as your truest self, is just an echo in a neurological void, a story you learn to tell, what happens when it starts learning a new one? What if that silence wasn't permanent? What if the gods are just dormant, sleeping giants in the forgotten architecture of our brains, waiting for the right kind of chaos to wake them up? Imagine our carefully constructed self-awareness, that chattering little narrator, is just a thin layer of ice over a deep, dark, ancient ocean of command and obedience. And what if a crack appears? Not a gradual melting, but a sudden catastrophic fracture. A world where overnight billions of people stop thinking for themselves and start hearing instructions, not from a phone, not from a screen, but from the echoing chambers of their own skulls. How would you even trigger such a terrifying neurological regression? Extreme stress is a good start, the kind of bone-deep societal panic that grinds civilizations to dust. Or maybe something more insidious, a specific frequency, a viral meme, a designer drug that selectively shuts down the modern brain's frontal lobes and reopens the hotline to the right hemisphere. Suddenly, Wernicke's area isn't just processing language, it's receiving divine broadcasts. Broca's area isn't just for speaking, it's for prophesying. The corpus callosum, that bridge between worlds, becomes a one-way street from God to man, your own brain weaponized against your sense of self. Think it sounds far-fetched? Look around. Consider the eerie unity of a mob, chanting in perfect unison, driven by a singular, non-verbal command. Or the disembodied voice of a GPS, an unquestioned authority guiding our every turn. We're already outsourcing our decisions to external voices we blindly trust. We have built a world of digital gods, algorithms that tell us what to buy, who to love, what to believe. We are willingly plugging our minds into a global bicameral system where the hallucinations are just push notifications and the divine command is whatever the trending topic is. We're practicing for the real thing. A neo-bicameral world wouldn't be grand temples and golden idols. It would be a grotesque puppet show. Billions of human automatons, their faces placidly blank, carrying out complex tasks with terrifying efficiency, all orchestrated by voices only they can hear, building, fighting, dying, without a single why crossing their minds. Who would be the new gods? Would they be benevolent? Or would they be the resurrected nightmares of our collective unconscious? Cackling, capricious entities using humanity as a flesh-and-bone plaything, a planet of 7 billion remote-controlled toys for a handful of cosmic pranksters. So the next time you have a sudden, brilliant idea that seems to come from nowhere, or a nagging, persistent thought you just can't shake, pause for a second. Interrogate that little voice in your head. Ask yourself, with all the chilling seriousness you can muster, are you the one thinking, or are you just the one listening?